Welcome back to the Expanded Minds podcast. Today, I have a special guest with me, and his name is Regan Forston. Now, Regan is a clinical hypnotherapist and certified life between lives facilitator from the Newton Institute. He is one of the 200 plus certified therapists in 46 countries who have helped over 65,000 clients having this life changing experience visiting heaven. So Regan is also the author of an amazing book called 3 Hours and 33 Minutes in Heaven and Reincarnation is Real. And so Regan's life experience and knowledge of the other side, what we would consider heaven, is something you would want to pay attention to and can help you view heaven in a new way. And with that being said, welcome on.
Well, thank you, Ezekiel. You have a great smile. That's good.
Thank you.
Must be a pretty happy guy, huh? Yeah. So Los Angeles area down there. So this, how long have you been doing this podcast now?
It's been like a year, a
Yeah,
year or two. Yeah, yeah.
I do a
I don't keep track.
podcast every Monday at 4 for the last 2 years, with a
You have
really
Natasha, right?
yeah, with Natasha. Yeah,
Yeah.
she'd be great to have on your show sometime too. She's a very talented, very beautiful human being, and she just loves helping people. It's like she and I do the same thing, but just a different modality. She just can see things with her mind. Like mediums do. And what I do with my clients is they become like a medium themselves when they're in trance. You know, um, so some people seem to be born with that ability. The rest of us humans, we have to get into a kind of a very relaxed state in order for our consciousness to expand to what lies beyond here. So, all this happens in a metaphysical world. People that I help to, in a sense, transcend this physical sense. It's like uh, what my clients do is experience like what some people have in a near death experience. Whether in an automobile crash or something happens, and this something in our consciousness activates, and we're able to see beyond this physical world. Um, but the Newton Institute now that I work with, actually, we just passed 70,000 now. We've had 70,000 successful sessions. And this seems, in our research, this seems to be um, a natural thing for people to experience. Like everybody seems to have this talent because our success rate is about 90% within one or two sessions. Some people require second session because they're too overwhelmed the first time, or they can't. They have kind of like a monkey brain and they can't really just relax. But we tell
Mhm.
people, if as long as you can relax and just allow it to happen, what we do is we go through the process, the natural process of people falling asleep, just by getting the body very, very relaxed. And when we can tell that our clients are just about to fall asleep, then we begin communicating with them to keep them in that state, that relaxed state. If we weren't talking to them, they would just fall asleep. But right there in that state, it seems like everybody has something I term a God switch, and they're able to retrieve other memories they have other than the life they have now. So my clients usually experience a past life on their way to the afterlife. Um, they see themselves pass away in this past life, and then what I do is I ask them. I says, "Okay, what happens now?" And they, in a sense, who this person who they were in this other life, they turn around. There's a guide or an angel or someone that they love that's there to escort them back home. Back to heaven. So then, because we've discovered there's no time and space over there, when they make contact with their guide and meet them, we get the guide's name, and then we ask them to switch to now time, and so that who they were in that past life switches to who they are in their life now. And then we ask the guide if my people can have a little tour of the afterlife, and they always say yes. And it's just, I tell you, I've sat next to a few hundred people now doing this with them, and I just can't tell you how exhilarating it is for me sitting next to them, realizing that these people are experiencing the afterlife. You know, um, it's very emotional sometimes because people see They ask to see if they can find up there a loved one that's passed on, and and they're able to have conversations with them. They're able to have conversation with pets that have passed on. They find out that, in our research, found out pets have souls too, just like we do. And on the other side, you're able to communicate with them like, since you're not in the human form, you're in the soul form. You can communicate from soul to soul. So, people have
Mhm.
conversations with their pets that passed on. Just like us, just like a human conversation. It's really amazing what happens here. So, what we're trying to do with the Newton Institute now is to get this word out. And I thank you, Zico, for having us on, because um, so many people I talk to about this, their jaw drops. Like, I had a conversation with a bartender. I was having a drink the other night at a place, and we got talking, and he asked me what I did, and I started telling him, and he just stood there for a minute, like not knowing even what to say. And he goes, "You mean anybody like me? I could just go in this trance. I could go to the other side and see what it's like over there." And I go, "Yeah." I said, "It's like, you got about 90% chance." And he goes, "That's just unbelievable." And I go, "Well, we kind of think it's that way too, but this is what happens. We're not for any one particular religion or spiritual pace. We're researchers, and we're just telling people what we find. And So people watching, if you want to read more, a lot about this, the book title is called Journey of Souls. And the second volume that came out 10 years after he published the first is called Destiny of Souls. And between the two, now they just passed the million mark as far as sales goes. And I can't tell you how many people will read the book. And then at the back of the book, it says, we'll go to the Newton Institute, newtoninstitute.org. And the 250 of us, there's 250 of us therapists now. And we're scattered, like I say, in 46 countries. So they can try to find a therapist near them. However, things have changed a lot since COVID. We found out when we had COVID, when the COVID was here, we experimented with trying this online, and it shocked us to no end that our sessions are practically the same, about almost 90% online. People can have this experience. That's how easy this is for people to have. Me, I was a tough cookie. My book, 3 Hours, 33 Minutes, Heaven, is about my personal journey over there. And people reading it are going to see that it wasn't easy for me. The first time that I tried, I couldn't get my crazy brain over here to relax, and it's analyzing everything and wondering what's going on and why are they saying this and that. And I couldn't relax enough to allow it to happen. So uh, what I did was they worked with me for a few more days, and um, and then I tried it a second time, and I got stuck. I was able to go to a past life the second time, and right as I passed away, and I saw my guide, which was really cool. But then I was stuck it just felt like I was in blackness somewhere, and nothing was happening. And so I'm thinking, oh no, and that's not going to happen again, although I feel I made progress. And my facilitator was well trained, and he just let me stay. What we discovered at this black place, this place of nothingness, is actually a place, that I was in. So I
Mhm.
mean, I felt comfortable, and it was great, but I wasn't seeing anything, hearing anything, but I just felt like I felt in a loving space. Um, and then, so I just kind of floated around in that space for a minute, and then I saw a pinpoint of red, like about the size of a pea, far in the distance, a little red light. And the facilitator said, "Well, just kind of float over towards that light." And in a nanosecond, boy, I was on the other side. There was my guide again, and I had this life changing experience. I think about it every day about. And it's been like 7-8 years since that happened now, and I've thought about it so much that part of me starts to think, well, did I just make that up? Did that really happen? Although I know it didn't, because I wrote the book about it, and right afterwards, and I wrote everything down. But it's just weird how the human mind is, because it all happens. We're seeing it somehow with our earthly consciousness, somehow like a dream or something. But the emotion that's involved and the things that happen while you're there are things that you just can't even make up. Um,
Mhm.
what we found out in our research is that we're not bodies like physical bodies. in our natural state. We're energetic forms, like balls of colored energy, and that's what we all are like in heaven or the other side. And then we take that energy that we have, or parts of our energy that we have there, and we embed it in like the human body to have experience. Ezekiel, one of the coolest things, I just think about how that we've discovered, and when people have these sessions, one of the most craziest but wonderful things they do experiences, we found out, like Ezekiel, when you decided to be Ezekiel, you didn't put all of your soul self into Ezekiel. You kept about half of yourself back home. So that means that all of us have part of us that's up there and part of us that's here. And what that means is when clients are on the other side, like if you were on the other side, Ezekiel, you can have conversations with the higher selves of people that are still alive in your life now. Um, I've had couples
Hmm.
come to me for couples therapy, which is interesting because they were at a standstill in their human thing here. So a counselor recommended them to me. Says, "Well, you guys are button heads here, and you're not getting anywhere. Go see Regan and have you guys go to the other side and talk to your higher selves and find out what the heck is going on in your relationship." And lo and behold, people that come back out of that, like I'll deal with one day, and then maybe the husband one day, and then the wife the next day, and then after that I get them both together and we share both of their experiences, and they find the deeper meanings behind their conflicts a lot of times. Like, why are they having such a difficult times? And they find out work they're going to have to do in order to heal their relationship or to move forward. And that's hard for some people sometimes because our human cells have to dig down and make changes ourselves. And some people that's pretty hard, sometimes. Um, so just another way of doing therapy. Um, so what I tell people, if they want to experience this, all they have to do is be willing to relax. And the techniques we have, we do a very slow induction because we want the people to go very, very deep. And we just take our time, have this the body, and just going down further and further and further and further as they're relaxing. And if we had if we had electronics on their brain to see how the waves of their brain were going, we found out that it happens in the theta. Like right now when you and I are talking, Ezekiel, we're
Yeah.
in a beta state. And then as you begin to relax, you go to alpha, and your brain waves spread apart a little bit. And then you go to theta and then delta. Where this all seems to happen is right at the theta waves. And that's when people are just, really, really relaxed that way. Um, so you may have now the thing about this when I do these podcasts is every time I say something, it brings up one question, and then that question brings up another and another and another. And it goes, sometimes I've been on these podcasts, they'll book me for an hour, and we're on there for 3 hours, and we just still haven't scratched the surface. So, if whatever we do in the time you have allotted here, if you want me to come back again, we can even delve into it further. But the main thing we want people to realize is it seems that God has opened a portal for the average person. We don't have to be saints. We don't have to be like monks or priests or holy men, but they've opened the portal for the average person to get a glimpse of what they're going to expect when they pass out of this human body. Um, and uh, I would say the least thing that people get out of having a session is they come out of the session realizing that they were born for a reason. In other words, everybody's life has meaning and purpose, and that you came down here on a mission to learn something or to teach something. And you realize you're never alone because in these 7, every single one has had a guide or an angel. Sometimes they appear that's looking after them and over them. And so you realize that your life has meaning and purpose, mission, something you want to learn. You're never alone. And that becomes compost, you know, and our who we are or who we really are goes back home again. Um, so it's an interesting phenomena. Um, Interesting so too that about 70% of the people that come to me for this are women. It's interesting. Overwhelmingly, women seem to be more take to this much more easily, and I think that's because women is a are a little bit more feelings, a little more vulnerable, and they're allowing this to happen. Um, so when I have men, it's usually a different kind of session. It's a little, just because men are a little different than women are. Um,
Hmm.
but so sometimes the men of that 10%, about 60-70% of those are men that just to relax enough to just let go, to let it happen. So, but you know, like me,
Yeah.
when I was in training, the there were 16 of us, and it was the beginning of the training. Takes about a year to get certified with the Newton Institute, because you have to go through the training, and then you have to have so many successful sessions, and then you have to write them all up and everything. They're making sure you're doing everything correctly, and then you can get certified. So um, I think after about a year and a half, I almost forget now, it took me to get certified, and then we're just we're just off and running that way. Um,
Yeah.
so any
I think
questions in right now, Ezekiel?
well, first off, I think I read your book and super fascinating. Like your personal journey was super,
Oh,
I mean, resonated with it a lot because I had
crazy, huh?
similar, yeah. Super
Is that
crazy.
kind of, can you relate to that in your life? Can you,
So
well,
some
see,
of
now
it,
you're
yeah.
young right now. There was so much of this was happening when I was your age. Now, wait till you're about 20, 30 years older, and you look back at now and you see, even starting this podcast, and where you're going to be as far as what you know about things, in about 20, 30 years. Um, you know, it's funny because a lot of time, ever since, as you remember from my book, I was very lucky that in my 20s I started connecting spiritually to the other side. I started believing that I was more than just this body, and that's when I would have dreams once in a while where a guide or somebody would show up. Amazing experience in the dream state where a guide was showing me around somewhere other than here, and they were helping me to learn or teaching me somehow to be more kind, more compassionate. They would show me things I needed to work on, some of the 5 passions that were out of whack and things like this, that was going to, help me to become a better person. So even in my 20s and 30s, about 2 or 3 times a year, I'd have like a spiritual experience, where somebody would, show up. So, um, yeah, there's something once you learn that you have these guides and they're watching you, and you become open to them, this is when you start to see little miracles happen in your life. People say, "Oh, what a coincidence! I ran into somebody today that I've been praying for, or something," and then you start realizing that they're not coincidences, but there've been these little God sightings, like, where things happen in your life, like. And so you begin to trust that intuition, or you begin to trust the signs that you get from the other side, on with your life, guest, even 20 years ago, that I'd be doing this work that I'm doing. Um, I mean, it's just be ready. But one thing you find out, Ezekiel, is that we're all down here for a purpose, and the purpose is to in a sense, be a coworker with the divine. And sometimes it takes us a while to catch on to that. Like, we're a little bit dysfunctional, and we go through, uh, you know, times being selfish and everything. And then eventually we realize that, it doesn't make us happy, trying to be, being a selfish person. And once we kind of join the team, in a sense, and we start um, doing good things in our life, even if it's just simple, life starts to become enjoyable. Um, I can't tell you how many people of my clients have said that they stopped complaining about things and stopped playing the victim, once they've been to the other side and back, because they realized that they signed up for this course, you know. It's like signing up for a college course and then you're in there and you're bitching and moaning that it's so hard, and you're wondering why you signed up for it, because it's just, you can't do it and it's too hard to learn, and it's, you're up all night and and then you finally stick with it and you pass the course, and you're the happiest person in the world that you stuck to it, and now you've learned new things and you've learned new skills. That's kind of like what it is with spiritual unfoldment, as we learn a little bit at a time. Nobody, in a sense, becomes a guru overnight. It's a steady process. Yeah. What city are you in LA?
In LA, like right next to downtown LA.
Oh, right downtown. I used to have a
Yeah.
loft at 7th Street, right at the 7th Street Bridge, right there by the Greyhound bus depot, down
Uh-huh.
there. And it was, I loved having that loft. It was great. Um, it was a God sighting how I ended up in that loft, which is another story. But I was just following my, like I say, my inner guidance, so to
Yeah.
speak. Um,
I was
so
actually quite
now,
fascinated. Uh, so you had like an out of body experience when you were like 8 years old, or not years old, like
no, it's
like young,
4
right?
years. Yeah, I was
Around
just a
4 years
little
old.
guy. Yeah, because I
Tell me
know I
about
know it
that.
was 4 years old because of the house I was living in. Because we moved we moved before, right after kindergarten, so I was about 4 or 5 years old. Um, and that was interesting because for a little kid, like I'm going to sleep, and all of a sudden, I'm on the ceiling looking down at my body, and and then I'm in my body looking up, and I see like an orb, and then I'm back up on the ceiling looking down at my body, and it confused me so much, that I jumped out of bed and ran into my mom and dad's room, and my dad came in the room, and how does a 4-year-old explain what's happened? You can't even, a 4-year-old can't even explain that. But it scared me a little bit, because how could I be up on the ceiling looking down at my body when I'm a 4-year-old? That doesn't make any sense to you, because no one's told you about any of this stuff. So, um, a second night it happened, and then it began to kind of freak me out. It was scared me,
Same
On the
thing.
third night, I sat in
Same
bed
exact thing.
as a little 4-year-old. I'm trying to hold my, yeah, trying to hold my, yeah. I was just I was on seeing myself from other than my body, you know. Um,
Okay.
so then the third night, I'm afraid it's going to happen again when I go to sleep. So here's this little 4-year-old sitting up, and I'm holding my, what does a 4-year-old know to do? I'm holding my eyes open, so that I don't fall asleep. But eventually I did. And then it's like I closed my eyes, and when I opened my eyes, there was two men standing in my room, and they were dressed in white. I wasn't scared at all. It just seemed like natural, but it was weird. Like, why wouldn't I be scared or something like that? But I wasn't at all. And they were very calming. And one of them, the one on the left, either through telepathy, I heard it, however, it was telepathy, or if they spoke, I don't remember which, but it just kind of calmed me down. It says, it's okay, it's okay. He says, you're not going to have that happen again until you to understand. And then I just felt relaxed. And I remembered laying back, and I fell asleep, and it never happened again until I was 23 years old. And that's when I had my first,
Hmm.
really big, out of body. And that happened because, spiritual found me. It was kind of weird in a way. I didn't go looking for it. It found me. And I just knew it was right for me. It was called Ekankar. And they gave me a spiritual exercise to do, where I would sing Hu, Hu. It's like an ancient name for God, a very high vibration. And they just says, just practice singing the Hu, relaxing, like doing meditation, and begin to create your own one-on-one personal relationship with God. And I just started doing that exercise, and about 6 weeks later, I was doing that exercise, and I found myself, totally aware that I was in my body, but totally aware that I was out of my body, and I was in another world, and it was different than here. Here's what was interesting about the experience I had Well, I was doing the hue, I was singing the hue, and all of a sudden I'm in this other world, and it was like a feeling I never felt before. I just felt like totally accepted, loved. And what I was seeing is in this place where I ended up being, the skies were, you know how they're blue here? There, they were kind of yellow. And I was seeing these, it was like wheat fields, and it seemed like about every acre there was a giant, beautiful tree. I mean, like these giant oaks. I could only say because oaks are those big and bulky trees like that. And and then I realized I was seeing 360 degrees. And that's when I really realized. I went, "Oh my God, I did it. I did it. I'm out of my body." And then I was back in my body. And about 25, 30 years later, after I've talked about this instance over and over again, part of me starts to wonder, did that really happen? Did I just make that up kind of stuff? And so I asked God, I said, why can't I have like a miracle like that happen in the physical? Something here, something I can see, that I can touch, or something like this, to show me that wasn't just something that now, after all these years, that I'm thinking, hey, did I just make that up, or did it really happen? Something like that. And then a few months later, I'm performing as a clown in a fair at the Frog Jump up in Calaveras County. And I had a magic ventriloquist show that I did. And the man that came right on after me was a Columbia storyteller. He was a docent at Columbia State Park, which was in that area. And he had the long beard. He was like from the 1800s, and he really looked like the real thing. Well, we became friends over the 4 days I performed there. And when we were all done, he says, "Hey, why don't you and your wife come up and visit my wife and I sometime?" And so a few weeks later, I came up there. I was with him. We spent the weekend with him. We didn't talk about anything spiritual or anything. So when it's time to leave, I'm going to get in my car, and you maybe remember from the book. I think I put that in the book.
Yeah,
I'm
you did.
starting to get into the car. He puts his hand on my shoulder and turns me around. He says, "There's something, you're going to think this is a little weird, but I think you're supposed to tell me about that dream he had." Now, this is like 30 years later, but something, when he said that, in my mind, I asked him, I said, "What color was the sky that I was seeing?" He said, "Yellow." And I said, "What was I looking at?" And he says, "You were looking at these magnificent trees." And I got weak kneed. He had to hold me up. Uh, because all of a sudden I'm realizing what God just did. Here I was, like, wondering if that was just something that really happened or anything. And here's this guy in the physical 30 years later or so. And he's asking me about that experience I had without me saying anything to him at all. He took me back inside and tried to explain to me. He says he didn't understand it either, but he says he seemed to be the keeper of some information about this experience that many people have. And he can intuitively know who's had this experience with the yellow skies and the magnificent oak trees. And he said that even recently he was being a docent at the state park. And after he was done doing his little show, a man from another country came up to him and said to him, "You're going to think this is weird, but something's telling me I'm supposed to ask you about this dream I had with the yellow sky." Well, about this dream I had. And then he would say to him, "What color was the sky?" The guy would say, "Yellow." "What were you looking at?" "The magnificent trees." Oh my God. It's just like, so from that day on, I've never doubted these visions that I have. Or if I'm in meditation and I have a vision or something, I know that it's real. It's not just, something that's just from the imagination. Um, when I prep people for having a life between life session, I actually send them homework to do. And in the homework, what they do is they write a list of questions that they want to have answered about their current life, because everybody, I would say, I don't remember, but I got to say 100%, because I don't remember anybody that I've helped do this that didn't get to go before a council and get questions answered. It just seems to be protocol. You're up there, you want to counsel, they're there for you. And you can ask all kinds of questions about your soulmate, about your occupation. This is where we get clarity when people ask, why did I decide to be born? What's my mission? here's the interesting thing. Most people find out that they're right, excuse me, they're right in the middle of their mission, that they're doing what they plan to come down here and do. But it's nice to get confirmation of that, because you go, wow. And then we ask the guides, we say, well, is my client on track, or do they need to step it up? And they find out most people are doing pretty good that way. Now,
Hmm.
another good
Well,
thing,
I have a
yeah,
quick question.
yeah,
So like I've personally had out of body experiences, or I've attempted to reach the other side, but the energy sometimes is too much, or like sometimes it's like getting jolted awake when you're
yeah.
having these experiences. You're getting jolted
Hmm.
awake, and then you fall back. Like sometimes when I get jolted awake like that, and I'm like, say for example, I come out of body and I realize I can do anything I want. I'm like, let me visit heaven. Sometimes I'll get jolted awake. I'll go up into heaven, and then I'll just fall back asleep.
Yeah.
So
And
like, how do you stay awake during that? How do you stay awake in that realm
it's
during that
very
experience?
It's very hard to do because when you're in that state, you're almost in a sleep state. So it's like, how would you keep yourself from falling asleep at night to stay awake all night? You couldn't do that, would fall asleep. And see, that's where it happens, where as a facilitator, because I'm communicating, like if you were to say I was, had you in trance and you're getting to that feeling, because of the fact that I'm keeping you focused and I'm communicating with you, it keeps you from falling asleep. So uh, that would be good, because the only other time this kind of thing happens sometimes with people is sometimes when they're meditating and they're in a deep trance state of meditation, and sometimes they'll have the experience and be able to um, stay there for some sort of time, but usually that's only minutes. Here we're
Oh,
talking about hours. Um, a typical session of mine lasts about 5.5 hours, but about half of that is going over your homework, making sure that, like I'm your tour director, and I want to make sure that if you're going to this place, that you get to see everything and do everything you want to do, talk to who you want to talk to, get the questions answered you want to get done. And so the first half of the session is I'm helping. We're planning the experience. We're planning what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, get your questions answered. And then we take a break in these sessions. Usually we'll have like an energy bar, something, a little bit of water. And then I have my clients lay down on my therapist couch, and then uh, real gently have them watch the process of them relaxing as their body's beginning to relax till they get very, very relaxed. And when I can tell, sometimes people do fall asleep, but I tap them on the hand. When I tap them on the hand, I would say, Ezekiel, can you hear me? And you would go, and then, once you would nod, then we would continue. So um, it's just that very, very relaxed state. There's so much to this, but the only reason that we have people go to a past life is we found out that um, that's a memory that they already have. In other words, they have a memory of that. They have a memory of leaving that body and going back home again. So it makes it easy that way, because when you're in that state and you have this memory of a past life, and when I do some people come to me and they just want to do a past life regression. Just that's all that they want to do. In that case, when they get to the past life, we just, we spend an hour or so just going forward or backward in the timeline, trying to get as much information as we can from that life and having them experience a lot of their memories there. Um, when we do a life between life, we do maybe 2 or 3 things in that past life, just, important events, but we're trying to get them to their death scene, to where it's the last day of their life, where they see themselves pass away. And then um, when they're out of their body looking down at their funeral or whatever there, that's when we ask them, we say, okay, what happens next? Like, turn around, is there somebody there? And they'll turn around, and in a sense it's like turning around. I use that as a word, but it's just, they'll go, oh, my dad's here, who's passed away, or they'll say, oh, my guide's here. Or sometimes they'll see there's this energy form that's there, and then I'll say, well, start communicating with the energy form and ask them if that's your guide. And they'll start, there's this like telepathic communication that happens, and the guide will introduce himself. And then I say to the guide, I says, well, Ezekiel, my current client right now, he was this other person, this other life, and they're right there with you in a way. I tell you, Ezekiel, this is so crazy because let's say let's say you were Margaret in another life. You're going to find out a lot of times about half of the women that come to me find out they're men in other lifetimes. Um, with the men, a lot of times they're men in other lifetimes. But I recently had Bob who came to me, who was in some European country, and I had him go to. I says, okay, when I touch you on the forehead, you're going to go to an important event in your life. I went 1, 2, 3. He's now in an important event, and he's on my therapist couch, and he's starting to moan like, oh, like something's hurting him. I said, what's happening? And he goes, I'm having a baby. Oh my gosh. And so I just, I didn't want him to have to go through that pain again. So I said, 1, 2, 3, you've just had the baby and tell me what's going on. Well, after the session, it blew his mind. He says, okay, Regan, I didn't make that up. I'm not making up that I'm a woman, for one thing. And another thing, that I'm going to go through, having a baby, that way. But he said, oh my God, it was so real. And I could just feel the labor pains. And he says, I have so much respect for women now, what they have to go through, So um, anyway, because
And
we
then,
can jump all over the place in this. But anyway, when the guide's there, and then uh, every time we've asked, we'll say, may my client say, I'm just using you as an example, Ezekiel, may he have permission now um, to visit the other side? And they go, yeah. And I'll say, well, we know that there's a soul group that Ezekiel could go to talk to people that are currently in his life now, or people that have passed on. If you've had any friends that have passed on, can he go there, or can he go before the council? And we'll ask the guide, which ones should he go to first? And boom, and immediately you'll find yourself, it almost happens once they say yes, it happens like in a nanosecond. And then I'll ask my client, I'll say, okay, well, if you're a counsel now, um, can you describe the room you're in? Because as researchers, we're trying to find out, is it always the same place? Is it different places? Wherever. Most of the time, people would describe it as like Greek architect, like marble floors, beautiful walls, kind of that sort of thing. But sometimes it's in a garden, it's outside or whatever. But and then I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, now how many people at your council? Count them from left to right, and then they'll count. Generally, it's about 3 to 6 is normal. Sometimes I've had 12 or 24 one time, where it was this huge group of elders that was with my client. Come to find out that that particular client was a very advanced soul, and he had actually uh, had been an elder on one of the as a council member over there. So he was very advanced, and he just decided he needed to get some more learning. So he came down the physical body. So when he went back there, he was like one of the elders himself. Very advanced soul, which is interesting.
oh,
With me, I had 6, and they were all they had the hoodies on, and it was down, so I couldn't really tell who they were, except for the one who was communicating with me, which I found his name was Late C, and he was a Chinese master or elder. And it's hard for me to even picture him without smiling, because he stood up there was like a table they were all behind. He would stood up, and he started communicating with me, and his eyes were so friendly and so full of joy and laughter, and man, so he just made me feel so relaxed and everything. And I asked him, like, what was my mission? Why did I decide to be born? And he said to me, a soul, um, you decided to come down to work on kindness. That was my major goal, is to learn to come down to be selfless instead of selfish, to be kind. And he said, you're doing pretty good. And I remember standing before there, and I felt, oh, great, great, I'm doing something right, like here. And then right next to him, just to the right of him, um, the hoodie kind of came back, and it was a female master, very pretty. And she smiled at me, and she said, Regan, she says, I really like the way that you're learning in this lifetime to balance your feminine and your masculine energy. And that made me feel good because I knew that was because of some things that had happened in my book, there that you read there was part of my life was about that. And that made me feel good, um, there. But my clients experience the similar things. They're
So, I
never,
mean, sorry, going
yeah,
back to the question though, because I
yeah,
mean, to answer the question of like when you're taking people through the process, how to make them not fall physically asleep. I'm talking about what I meant by the question though was like from at least my own personal experiences going out of body and then trying to go to heaven and stuff like that. Sometimes I'd come back to my body and the experience would end early. Like the experience would not, it wouldn't go all the way through because I couldn't stay awake in that
yeah.
experience. So like, does that happen to people when you take them to the other side and like they're
No,
in an experience and then they get sucked back into their body and they're like, oh man, I didn't get to fully see
um,
what I wanted to see? Or does that
no,
happen? And if so,
but just because of the way we do this, there's so much communication going on. And the state that they're in, the best I can describe it is it's like if you were going through this experience, Ezekiel, you would 100% know that I'm sitting next to you, that we're communicating, that you're going through this experience. But the other half of you, it's like a split screen. The other half of you is there going through that other lifetime or talking to the council and everything. It's just weird how it happens that it just seems to be natural and normal. Uh, and it's so easy. Like I had one client, she was from Belarus, and it was during COVID, her grandmother died, and she was closer to her grandmother than she was even to her own mother. She said her grandmother had just loved. So when the grandmother died, and she couldn't, airfare was restricted, or you couldn't go there. She was devastated that she couldn't be with her grandma after her grandma died. So she didn't even know if she believed in this process, but she said she was willing to try anything because she missed her grandma so much. So it was easy for her. She just went right into trance, so easy. Uh, in the past life, it was all the bells and whistles. She could, see things, hear things, describe things. She sees herself pass away, turns around, there's her guide, all of a sudden before the council. And she's starting to ask questions about her life before asking to see her grandma. And then she just sits up out of trance and goes, "This can't be happening. This can't be happening. It's too easy." you know. And she was having an A plus session. But that's how for some people, because it just her her mind was saying, her analytical mind was saying, wait a minute, this is supposed to be more Twilight Zone like, and instead of it being so easy, that way. Well, we'd already been into the session about 4.5 hours, so we decided that when I came back down to LA again, we were going to do another session for her, which I do for free for people. If anything happens in the first session that something doesn't happen, then I say, don't worry about it. We'll do another session in a few months for free. And most of those people that come back, a higher percentage of those have success the second time when they didn't the first time. So the second time she came back, she just was laughing and relaxed and like, okay, she says, I guess that was happening. I just didn't know. So again, she went right in, boom. And this time she went to her soul group and there was her grandma. And she's laying on my therapist table and she's just tears, she's with her grandma. And she had the most wonderful conversation. She found out that her grandmother was actually her guide who had come down in physical form to help her in this lifetime, to be right there with her physically rather than being in heaven. But now that her grandma had died, she says, they were talking about we were talking about her mom. And so her grandmother says, well, mom, my daughter, she's not really spiritually connected as much as she should be, so I'm going to work on her from the other side, and I want you, granddaughter, to work on mom from the physical side, and we'll get her to advance, that way. So they were going to double team the mom, although the mom did say after, when the grandmother died, she had wrote an email to her daughter in America here and said that the weirdest thing happened when she was cleaning out the room where grandma stayed below their house there. She says all of a sudden this room had just been cleaned. So another cleaners in there, everything was spick and span. She says, I'm in there moving things around. And she says to her daughter, says, I think you're going to think this is crazy, but I smelled grandma's perfume all over, you know, and that's how sometimes it happens from when people,
Interesting.
yeah, you've heard, maybe you've heard stories of where people have someone that dies and then and then they're going about their grieving and stuff like this, and all of a sudden someone will smell the perfume, or the smell of beautiful flowers or something when there's no flowers around or something, and they intuitively go, "Oh, that's mom," or "That's so and so." I just know it. They have that
Yeah.
feeling. That way. So there's so much we found out about the other. We pretty much know now what happens when you die, what the process is. Um,
And
you know,
what's the process?
well, generally speaking, when someone passes away, they're out of their body pretty much immediately, and there's a guide or an angel or someone there to meet them, to take them back home again. We know that in a lot of cases, people don't want to go back to heaven, back home yet, because they want to stay around and comfort people that are grieving. So when that happens, like when my clients, I say, "Okay, are you ready to go back to heaven, back home?" And they go, "No, I need to stay around." And I'll say, "Okay, I'm going to be quiet a little while. I want you to do your thing, whatever. And then when you're done, just speak up and let me know. And I'll ask you what you did to comfort the people there. And so we can have it on the tape because we record all this." So I'm just quiet, just sitting there for a little while. And then pretty soon my client will say, "Okay, I'm finished." And I'll say, "What did you do?" And the number one thing they do is they say that they're able to implant themselves in people's dreams. You could be having a random dream, and all of a sudden there's mom or dad who just passed away, smiling at you or communicating with you in some way. He said that's easy because when people are asleep, it's easy because they don't have their left brain involved so much. They're more in they're into an altered state in a way in the dreams.
Hmm.
One person told me, um, this man said he had a habit of, in when he was alive, he would sneak up on his wife when she's reading a book, and he would blow on the back of her ear, and then she would turn around, like this. That was his thing. He would do once in a while. So he said he used all of he's passed away. He's trying to show her that he'd tell his wife's grieving so much for him, and he said he tried to use all of his power to try to make that happen again, and then all of a sudden his wife goes like, and looks around, and she goes, "Oh my, you're here, aren't you? You're here." And once he knew that she acknowledged that, then he felt okay. Now it's okay to leave her. She's going to be all right because I let her know that I'm okay. And he could sense that she picked it up on some level, that way. There's a
Wait,
great,
are you sorry? Are you with this person in a deathbed, or is this just a session? Sorry.
well, this was a case from a colleague of mine, that he
Okay.
wrote about. He wrote, it's in one of the books that's been published. Um, we have, since Michael Newton passed away now, we've been publishing, us therapists submit case histories to the Institute here, and then they've been coming out with different volumes of cases. It'll be from random therapists around the world. Um, and I'm trying to think of the name. Oh, Memories of the Afterlife is one of them. It's called Memories of the Afterlife, which is a good book to read. Um, so people need to think, like anybody watching this, think about if you could be on the other side and you could be feeling all this love and you could go before a council of wise life coaches or wise elders. These are people that are spiritually advanced beyond where you probably are. And what questions about your life would you want to have answered? Um, and also, who would you want to speak to if you could visit? In other words, maybe you've had a mom or dad, or you've had a child that's passed on. Who would you like to have a conversation with? Or if you've had a pet that passed on that you're mourning still, you know. Um, and then what I do, like I say, I have people write all that down. And so that I try to make that happen on the other side. That's two of the big things that happen. But for me, one of the cool things was, um, uh, I was allowed to visit a place of higher learning, and they had, because I one of the questions I had written down, my facilitator um, had me ask the guide over there if there was a place in there that gave inspiration for writing music, and the guide said, "Yeah." And all of a sudden, I'm in this room. It wasn't a big room, though. Seemed like it was about 20 foot wide, and I was sitting in a chair on a little platform with a riser. I was only about 6 foot riser above the rest of the this room, and all of a sudden I hear this violin music, and I turn around, and my guide, Rebazar, was playing the violin. So, like, welcome to the music room. And so I asked him there, I says, "Well, okay, I've always wanted to compose music or something. Is there a way I can get inspiration? Like, can I meditate, or how can I do that to get inspiration to do music?" And he said to me, "Okay, watch this." And he says, "The next time that you're going to write music, feel yourself being back in this room again." And he had a fishing pole with hooks on it, and he like out to where the audience would kind of be, or out in front of me, the stage. I didn't see anybody out there or anything. And
Mhm.
when he pulled it back like this, instead of fish being on the hooks, there were musical notes. And he says, just thinking of this image of, you know, of fishing for musical notes or something would put me into the state of creating, you know. Um, and so, because I was a music major in college for 2 years, but I wasn't I wasn't because I was just chasing girls at the time in college. It's like that was what it's all about, is hooking up or something. And I didn't study and everything. I never learned to read music, but I learned a lot about music. So I could do chords and things, you know. So after that, sat down, and I don't know how I did it, but I got I think 18 song. I just got my first residual check recently. It's on, I think on iHeartRadio. Some of my songs they played like 26,000 times, and I got a check for $98. You know, there's not much money in music for sure, you know, but also that was similar. That happened when I was a comedian all those years. I had an out of body experience where I found myself in a cave that was high. It was a cave that was very high up on a like a. I keep thinking of like in Yosemite where they have that that mountain that's straight up, you know. And about halfway up there was like an opening, and there was a cave in there, and that's when I'm looking at it from the outside. But I was on the inside, and I was there, and again, Rebazar was there, and he said he wanted to show me something. And he took me over, and we went to the edge of the cave, and we were looking out over this world. And it was the world of comedy. In other words, we wanted, you know, for writing. And it was like looking at Willy Wonka world. I mean, there was all these beautiful hot air balloons with all this. It just made you smile and feel good. And he said, when you're going to do comedy, just picture this picture what you're seeing right now. After that happened, I swear, um, it just is 100% accurate. When I had to write a corporate comedy routine, um, after that point, I was able to do it. I never got I never got writer's block. A corporate company could call me and say, "Oh, this is last minute, but we have a conference coming up next week. Can you come and do a custom comedy show for us?" And I would just start writing, and I had the most amazing time as a ventriloquist doing corporate roasts, you know, for companies. I would study their product or service, and they would send me information on the key people in the company and tell me a little bit about them. And I did that for about, gosh, 15 years. And some of the biggest companies in America I did, and I got paid really well for doing it. And it was like a spiritual experience every time. You know, when you're writing a routine that was like a divinely inspired, and people are laughing so hard that they're crying. You know, when you're talking about them and the people, and people having fun, poking fun at each other in the company and stuff, all good natured. You know, and it was just kind of a neat thing. And as you read in my book, that kind of spurned off into me being a fake motivational speaker for corporations. You know, they would hire me to come in as an expert on a particular topic, and to be believable at first, and then kind of go off a little bit until people are going, "This guy's crazy. You know, he doesn't know what he's talking about," you know, and then they find out it was just a joke on them. You know, that was a high, because I mean, they're paying me a lot of money to do this, and so I can't goof up, and I can't anybody figure out that I'm an imposter, you know, until it's time, you know, for the reveal, you know. So it was a fun thing. So anyway, there's places of higher learning. I've had clients that are artists, and they end up in a school over there where they teach inspiration for art. And I'll tell you, for you artists out there, if any of you are art, because the three that I'm remembering right now, my clients are artists, all three of them were told the same thing when they wanted them to improve their artistic abilities. They said, "Don't get too technical, paint from your heart as if you were a child." you know, in other words, because my clients had gotten, well, it has to be this way, and it's got to be this and everything. And they say you're losing you're losing the spiritual energy that's going to be in your work unless you're coming just from your heart with joy and laughter like you were a child, that way. And that really helped some of my clients, it says, yeah, I need to get back to make this fun again instead of being, so technical. I had one woman come to me. She was a professional dancer, and she was in her 50s now, and she was upset because she wasn't getting these parts in plays and musicals and stuff anymore. And she knew it was because of her age that they're picking the young girls, to do all this stuff. So she's on the other side, and when she's before the council, she asked about that, and they said, well, at your age now, you might think about being a teacher, teach other people. She didn't want to hear that, but she knew it was correct. It was this that time. So I happened to think I had the inspiration over there because I'd done it with other clients. I said, hey, ask your guide if there's a place that dancers can in heaven. Is there a place where people on earth can get inspiration for dance here on earth? And they go, yes. All of a sudden, she's in this dance studio in heaven. And I said, what's happening? And she goes, oh, people are dancing. And I said, well, describe to me more. She says, well, over here, there's this couple and they're doing, it looks like a cha-cha. Some people over here are doing like a waltz, and here's some people freestyling. And I thought, this doesn't make any sense. I says, well, what, because you need different music, right? How can they all be dancing to the same music? And she says, oh, no, everybody's hearing the music they need for their dance, which is pretty cool. See, now that made it sound like, okay, she just didn't making this up. This is something from heaven, So then I happened to think, I said, do you have a salsa instructor there? And they go, yes. And I said, and all of a sudden this being appears. He's the salsa and, inspiration guy. And then I said to her, said, ask the guide if you can dance with this salsa instructor here. And they said, yes. So I said, well, I'm going to be quiet. I want you to have this dance. So she's entranced and she's just, she's just having the time of her life. And then when she's done, she goes, oh my God, I just had to dance with the best salsa dancer in heaven, and she experienced that, So I had another woman found herself in a comedy club in the other side. Now that was pretty interesting, but her whole session was about love through laughter and comedy and good cheer. And part of the session there, a guide gave us a whole dissertation speaking through her. He gave me this whole dissertation about the importance of comedy in people's lives, of laughter, and he showed us like a pie, like they do in PowerPoints, and they show 15% this, makes up this whole pie. And love, like part of love's the whole thing. And laughter was a big piece of that pie, just saying how it's God's way of healing. It's God's way of allowing us to not take things so seriously so that we can, we can love ourselves more. It was just amazing, this information we get from the other side. So, wow, just so many amazing. Different past lives. Yeah. So sometimes for people watching this now, if they want to have a session or anything, they could go to the Newton Institute, try to find someone in there. There's a list of everybody, and they could. What most people seem to do is they look down the list and there's someone, they see their picture and they feel a connection. That's how people pick me a lot of times. As I go in there and I'll say, well, there's two other therapists here in my area besides myself. And I says, you sure you would be more comfortable with them or something? No, I just saw your picture and I just know it's got to be you. That seems to be how it works. I'd be happy to do sessions for anybody if they want to do it either online or in person. I go to LA about 3 times a year. I line up about 6 or 7 people and I do it like within a 2-week period. I don't like to do, you remember from my book, when I had finished I'd left heaven in a sense, and I'm coming back to earth and I'm seeing the earth below, and my guide, I can still feel Rebazar's with me. And I'm looking at the earth, and from space, it looks so beautiful. So it's just floating. And so it's this beautiful place. And then as I started getting closer, as I was coming back to my body in a sense, or back to my earth consciousness, all of a sudden I'm in trance, but I'm feeling pain. I'm feeling emotional pain all over. So my guide stopped me and he says, what you're beginning to feel, Regan, is the emotional pain of the earth. And when you think about it, like right now, Ezekiel, there's probably millions of people going through heartache right now. They're going through, someone doing violence to them, or if that energy, you could see a ball, it would be like atom bombs going off all around the earth with people's emotional energy right now. And he told me, this is when I realized that me doing this work is something that I decided to do, because he said, are you sure you want to do this? And I knew he meant, do I want to come down and do this therapy work with people? And I think I said the F word. I said, yes, So here I am, and I think, oh my gosh, I just said the F word, and here's my guide right here. That's my earthly self. But it was so much that I just realized from soul level, I really wanted to do this work. So he says, Regan, if you're going to do this life between life therapy work, I'm going to tell you to do 4 things. Because if you don't do these 4 things, your physical body won't be able to handle the energy that's being happened, and your physical body will get sick and you're going to die. And I went, okay, I'm listening. What do I need to do? What? This is scary, So he told me to do, first thing he said was, you wake up in the morning, and this is good for anybody listening here. When you wake up in the morning, do a little spiritual exercise, even if it's just a 10-second thing where you're acknowledging your higher beingness or your higher self. He said, and I heard this prayer in my mind as this was happening. Bless this day and those that I serve, as I keep one foot in heaven and one foot planted firmly on earth to accomplish my mission. Okay, that's what I kind of heard in my mind. He said the second thing to do was to spend more time in nature. He says spending time in nature is God's way of balancing the energy in your body, of relaxing, of helping you with any anxiety or anything that you might have. Nature. Third thing he said was to do as many random acts of kindness as I could. And I saw myself, picking up in my mind a piece of paper, a piece of trash that someone left on the ground, putting it in a trash can. I mean, something even that minor is a act of kindness. Okay. And then the fourth thing was to talk to other therapists and find out how they physically have balanced themselves. Other therapists that do regular therapy, like my regular therapy practice, I deal with a lot of post-traumatic stress, fears, phobias, and violence that people have had done to them, causing post-traumatic stress.
Is it
Um,
hypnotherapy, right? Like,
yeah.
or the talk?
So
Okay,
yeah, people
hypnotherapy.
watching this, I'm an energy psychologist, so I don't do talk. We talk. I mean, there's regular talking therapy, and that's okay, but that's a slow way to recover. Just sitting there,
Mhm.
every time you go in and talk about your issues, you desensitize yourself a little bit to it, so that people eventually take the energy away from that awful thing that they're trying to do. But and I'd be happy to, again, sometime, Ezekiel, we could do another podcast on energy therapy, because it's taken over the world of therapy right now.
Yeah,
We have
that's
found,
super interesting topic.
oh, man, I can't tell you how many times, like especially EFT, which is tapping. Um, I learned it in hypnotherapy school actually, but I thought it was too silly. I thought, okay, what's this going to do? This isn't going to do anything. I'm not doing that. Hypnosis is cooler, so whatever. Until I had a man that was I was doing a hypnotherapy session for a man who was suicidal, and his wife was in federal prison. He had just lost several $1 million, and that he used to have. He lost his medical practice. He didn't even have a car to drive, and he was just in despair. And he's this young doctor, and he's afraid no woman will ever want him again, and he just wants to kill himself. Um, and one of the things that was his problem was he couldn't answer the phone. Anybody calling him, he would just couldn't answer his phone anymore, because he thought that when he answered the phone, the people on the other side were going to think he was this drug dealer, which he ended up not being. It was something where the feds came after and arrested him for um, selling drugs on the internet using his doctor's license with another doctor from Canada. Come to find out, his wife was doing it behind his back using his license, pretending to be him. And she was getting her drugs that way. And she ended up in federal prison. He was totally exonerated, but it was all over the internet. It was all over everything. So his reputation was kind of ruined, because people are going to think, oh, he's just this rich guy that gets off because had all these $2 million in legal fees. But anyway, long story short, he couldn't answer the phone. I says, well, and then I remembered tapping or EFT that I learned. And I thought, this is interesting. I said, close your eyes, picture the phone ringing. And on a scale of 1 to 10, where there's, 10 being, there's no way I'm answering the phone. 1, you're going to pick it up and answer it, no problem. And he goes, oh man, I'm plus a 10. I'm more than a 10. I just can't do it, So then I thought, okay, I learned this tapping in hypnotherapy college. So I had him say, even though I have this fear, of picking up the phone because someone's going to think that I'm a drug dealer and they're going to think I'm some horrible person, even though I have this feeling like that, I love and accept myself. I love and accept myself, even though I can't answer the freaking phone, Anyway, I did that with him about 10 minutes. I had him close his eyes. I says, okay, the phone's ringing on a scale of 1 to 10. Where are you? And he just looked 0. Oh my God, I could do it. From then on, he was able to start his life again. He could answer the phone, and went from a 10 thinking this is never going to end. And in a few minutes, he was to a 0. And he started building his practice again. A few years later, I was a groom at his wedding, and he had met somebody. He had a 3-year-old BMW, but it was all paid for. His practice was going again, and I saw him 3 weeks ago in San Diego, and I did a life between life thing for him, and because he was having physical issues right now, and we were able to find out why he had his sicknesses that he had, what he needed to do to clear him up on his own. It all had to do with his way of thinking and everything. He was making himself sick. And he's about to come into $500 million. Imagine that.
Wow.
He went from $64 is all that he had when I first met him. From having millions, he had no place to stay, no car, no business, anything. And he was that, and he turned his life around. And something that he created in the lab when he was in medical school, he ended up getting FDA approved. And it's like a neosporin kind of thing that heals, but faster than neosporin does. So the military is going to be putting it in all the soldiers' packs in case they get wounds. They can put it on, and it's going to be going all over the world. And the bigger companies bought him out for $1 billion, but half of it goes to his business partner and half is going to him. So that's just crazy.
That's an amazing story.
Isn't that?
Jeez.
So yeah, he's a wonderful guy. I just, we've just become very close over the years because he was one of my first hypnotherapy clients. One of the first ones I used. Once I did that with the EFT. So energies there's another thing called havening, which is like havening touch. And it's kind of a sister to EMT. And if people go to Havening Touch, the official site, there's some videos on there, and you'll see some people that have remarkable healing in just a short amount of time. So on my site, on visittheafterlife.com, if you go to the EFT section and hypnosis section, you can see videos of 4 veterans that have severe post-traumatic stress. I mean, they're like this. They're so crazy when they have to think of their issue. And in 4 sessions, they're talking like this. They can't believe it. And they tested them 6 months later, and they were still like that. So anyway, people need to know about that too. So if we all have crap that we have to go through, and we all have wounds, and sometimes those wounds can keep us from moving forward in our life. And now with energy psychology, people can balance that energy. When the energy's balanced, the problem just goes away. Like when you can think of, I had a man come to me whose son had shot him in the head when he was sleeping. And so his son was trying to murder him, but the bullet went in his ear and it came out his jaw down here instead of going up here. So he was on a scale of 1 to 10, he says, I'm at a 23. Oh, that's bad,
Jeez.
Oh my gosh. I did a session with him, and an hour later, he was at a 4 instead of a 23. The second session, he came back, we got it to 0. A third session, months later, 0. He couldn't believe it. He says, I know my son shot me, and I feel bad for that and everything, but I'm not doing this when I think about it now. And that's what it does. These energy psychology, it balances all that out so people can kind of get on with their lives, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm running out of time here. But
Yeah.
is there any like last things that you'd want to say
Well,
specifically about like the Newton Institute and the going to
Yes.
heaven and things like that?
Okay. So anybody watching this, just know now that there's a process that you can go through or you can read about. Okay. And it's from the Newton Institute. And it's a process where that's about 90% successful, where you personally could go to the other side, um, visit people that have passed on, talk to the higher selves of people that are currently alive in your life now, um, and get questions answered before a council of wise elders, and have this feeling of love like you've never felt before. It's an easy process, for most people, and we've done it with 70,000 people so far. And we just want people to know about that, because imagine how your life could change if you could find out the why to things. And this is what most people get, is they get the answers to why they're going through what they're going through, what their illnesses are that they're going through, um, and so forth. So you can go to my website, visit theafterlife.com. Very easy, visit theafterlife.com. There's videos on there and everything. You can get a hold of me through there. You can get my book on Amazon, which is about my own personal experience, called 3 Hours, 33 Minutes in Heaven, by Regan Forston. And the two books, if you want to read more about case histories, these are sold 1 million copies, and that's again, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. So, be happy to help. So I'm happy to help anybody with regular therapy if you want to do that on Zoom, or pretty much if you're anywhere in Northern or Southern California. I kind of make the rounds, and I can see you in person that way. But I'll tell you, Zoom has been a miracle. Like right now, we're talking like Ezekiel. I feel like I'm like right there in your room with you, just having a nice conversation with a nice person.
You could be. Half of
Yeah,
you is here, other half's
yeah,
over there.
yeah. It's great. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if you don't have a session, just knowing that it's possible is good, because then you're going to think that, oh, wow, maybe I haven't gone through this process, or maybe I'm too scared to go through it. But I'm starting to realize that maybe my life has meaning and purpose. Maybe I do have a mission here. Maybe I should stop complaining to God or being mad because of what's on my plate that I have to deal with, and realize I need to get to work and learn from these experiences that I'm having to go through. Okay. Maybe I chose my difficult mom for a reason, because people find out on the other side that you choose your mom and your dad and the people that you want to be in your play, to help you learn and everything like that. So stop bitching about your life and get to work, and it's all about, as you find out, it's all about waking up in the morning and being a loving, kind, compassionate person as much as you can. You're always going to throw a little crap on the other side where you don't, you fail, but you get right back up and just move forward with trying to be kind. So
That's amazing. So I'm going to link everything in the description below so you can find it easily. And once again, thank you for coming on for part 1, Regan.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, we got more to talk. There's so much more about this.
Definitely.